Hello from the island of Penang. I hope you're having an amazing day, because if you're having an amazing day, I'm having an amazing day. If I'm having an amazing day, you should be having an amazing day. My ancestors came from Penang, so technically Penang is my ancestral homeland. Yes, I am a Penang Peranakan. My grandfather brought the family over to Kuala Lumpur, the brutal capitalist dictatorship of Kuala Lumpur, when my father was just a little boy, and that was a great tragedy in my life. That hijrah, that migration from Penang to KL was indeed a great tragedy, because if he hadn't moved, why, I'd be a Penangite today. But since my grandfather was working for Shell, he had no choice but to go to KL because they posted him. My grandmother was an English teacher, by the way. Anyway, Penang's a great place, you know, very well-mannered people, very clean streets, as you can see, not rat-infested and dirty and lumpen like Kuala Lumpur. You know, I really feel much more relaxed in Penang. You know, the problem is I was born in Kuala Lumpur, so hey, that's where I have to be, right? But yeah, I come back quite often, and I'm back for the weekend in Penang, just for a holiday, weekend getaway, if you will, as a domestic passport bro, trying to escape the hustle and bustle of KL. Because Penang is one place where you can be unapologetically English speaking and Peranakan. Anyway, today I'd like to talk to you about something that's really close to my heart, and it's been really bothering me for quite a while. And I have been noticing a very disturbingly familiar historical pattern re-emerging again. And just like Karl Marx said, history repeats itself, first as tragedy, then as farce. I don't want history to be repeating itself in a continuous cycle of violence. So, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. And yeah, don't take this video to be a pro-Israel video or a pro-Zionist video. Okay, because first of all, I'm very adamantly pro-Palestine. Okay, so just watch it with an open mind and try not to turn it off. Well, I guess you're probably aware by now that Israel is burning. Literally, not just metaphorically. Yes, the Zionist project, which is nearly 8 decades old, is finally coming to its logical conclusion. Basically, being crushed by the weight of its own contradictions. And as a result, the world has turned on Israel, and as a matter of fact, it is now suffering under the weight of its own contradictions. So this is a very dangerous juncture we've arrived at, because it is at this point where we have to look carefully into what Friedrich Nietzsche said. When fighting monsters, take care that you do not become a monster yourself. And this quote is very it really rings true when you see just how many people on the left, and I understand where the anger comes from, because I too am angry over the injustice, the grave injustice that was carried out on the Palestinians to create the fake country of Israel. But I see many people on the left now cheering for Israeli deaths, or basically giving their undivided support to Iran in order to shell Israel, and basically openly saying things like, I don't care how many Israeli people die because of what they did to the Palestinians. And I understand where this anger, this righteous anger on the left comes from. You know, I really do. There's a Peranakan mansion behind me. This righteous anger comes from the deep-seated sense of injustice that the left feels towards what has happened to the Palestinians. And it's a very understandable type of anger. But when you say, I don't care how many Israeli people die and the Israelis just got what was coming to them, then I'm afraid that you have crossed the threshold into Zionist logic, even if you weren't trying to do so. Because when you say, the Palestinians have suffered immensely, so I don't care how many Israeli people die, that's basically the same thing as saying the Chinese suffered immensely under the war, so I don't care how many Japanese people die. Or if you want to hit closer to home, that's like saying the Jews suffered immensely, so I don't care how many Arab people die. That's basically the same logic, do you see? So this might surprise you, but I actually do not hate Zionists. I think that Zionists' political and I think the worldview of the Zionists is a very understandable one. It's not something that arose simply out of hatred for Palestinians. The Zionist worldview is indeed a very protectionist and very militant worldview, but it came out of legitimate fear and a legitimate sense of siege that they had. Because yes, let's not beat about the bush. For centuries, Jewish people were persecuted, hounded, and bullied by people all over Europe. Now the problem is that the Zionists correctly diagnoses the problem. That yes, the Jewish person is indeed the scapegoat. The innocent Jewish person is indeed the scapegoat for most of Europe's ills. But the Zionists arrives at a mistaken conclusion that in order to save the Jewish people of the world, they need to build a fortress around themselves. They need to build a fortress, quite literally a military fortress, in order to protect the tribe. And it's an understandable worldview. I actually don't hate the Zionists, and I actually do not consider Theodor Herzl a monster. Do you know why? Because I too have suffered marginalization and alienation in my own society, Malaysia. Now, I'm not saying that my experience as an anglicized, English-speaking Peranakan leftist socialist is comparable to what the Jewish people have experienced in Europe, but I understand this feeling of defensiveness, this feeling that you need a space of your own in order to be safe, because frankly, I too often get my loyalty questioned, not only by the conservative factions of the Malays in Kuala Lumpur and the rest of Malaysia, but also by the mainstream Chinese society in Kuala Lumpur, which sees me as a colonial relic. Because I have to tell you that many Peranakans, that is to say Straits Chinese with mixed heritage, indeed were seen as the Queen's Chinese during colonial times, because they had the closest proxy to the British. I mean, they had the closest proximity to the British, because we were neither too Chinese nor too Malay, and we were sort of like a middle of the road sort of minority. So the British basically put the Peranakan as the middleman. They basically became teachers, clerks, administrators, and so on and so forth. So that's why you see me using the English tongue and not Mandarin or Hokkien or Cantonese, because my grandfather and grandmother simply didn't think that Hokkien was very important and that English was more important, because you must understand they were colonial era Peranakans. I am a product of my material conditions. Unfortunately, in the Mandarin-dominated new money Cinque culture of KL, Cinque means late arrival Chinese, whose ancestors came in the 1800s. Peranakans can trace their ancestry back to Zheng He, right? The sailormen who came with Zheng He married the local women and basically created a new subculture known as the Baba Nyonya. Baba is a male Peranakan, Nyonya is a female Peranakan. A Baba Nyonya food is supposed to be the most sought after food in Singapore. But the point is, I too, like Herzl, have wondered if we, anglicized Baba Nyonyas, would be safer in an ethno-state of our own. That was during my reactionary days, when I was a reactionary liberal. Look, I was never pro-Palestine, I was never pro-Israel, but I too have wondered if indeed we might need a safe space of our own, because I'm often called things like banana, colonial relic, and basically whitewashed by people in the diaspora who are not aware of the hybrid identity of the Peranakan. They assume everyone with a Chinese face has to speak Chinese and act Chinese, right? But but you see, that's unfortunately a contradiction that arises when a Peranakan whose grandparents went through the British education system ends up meeting a first or second generation migrant. There's a disconnect. That's why I don't really click well with Asian American diaspora activists. I've rubbed quite a number of them the wrong way, in fact. One of them called me a whitewashed British boot-licking cuck, right? But I'm not. I just so happen to speak the Englishman's tongue. But I assure you, I have no intention to bring the British back. And at the same time, I have no intention of replacing the colonizer's lash with the Chinese Taukeh's pen. I intend to put an end to all forms of class oppression. So I'm not interested in, defending the Taukehs or the bosses of the Chinese community. And for that, I'm called self-hating. But yes, I don't hate Theodor Herzl, because as a child of empire who was basically shaped by the material forces of empire and the hybridization of Chinese and Malay cultures, I too have wondered if, we could do with a state of our own. In fact, if I were a reactionary, I'd probably be a Peranakan version of Theodor Herzl. I would be advocating an ethno-state in Malacca or Penang and calling it Baba Land. Yes, our national dish would be curry capitan, and our national language would be English. But you see, that's just a pipe dream. And I have no interest in building a fortress. I want to build a garden that includes everyone. That's what led me into making the videos about the Chinese ultras in Kuala Lumpur, who basically demand that I learn Chinese and act more Chinese in order to pass their loyalty tests. Because apparently I'm a traitor to the Chinese community, a British bootlicker, a colonial dog, if I don't act more Chinese or behave more Chinese or try to learn Chinese. For the record, I have no ill will towards Chinese speakers, but I'm not going to pretend that the Chinese language has any relevance to my personal life, and I'm not going to pretend that I have any nostalgic feelings for China, since my ancestor came here several centuries ago and married into the Malay Peninsula. So I'm not like you. Doesn't mean I'm better than you. The point is, some of them even demand that I speak more Malaysian because apparently my accent makes them uncomfortable. But the point is, I'm not here to make you comfortable, you see. I'm a Marxist. My job is to analyze the contradictions of class society and come up with a solution in order to end exploitation. I'm not here to make you comfortable, I'm here to make you think. It's your mother's job to make you comfortable, damn it, not mine. Anyway, I'm not going to tone down my personality just because some of you find it unappetizing. I am what I am, and if you don't like it, you can bugger off. You know, you can always watch Uncle Roger if you find that more your cup of tea. But I am myself, and I'm not going to change. But let's get back to the topic. Where was I? Yes, I don't hate Theodore Herzl, I just view him as a tragic villain, if you want to call him that. Because I too have felt constantly walking around Kuala Lumpur like a perpetual outsider. 2 Chinese for the Malay and 2 English for the Chinese, yes. In the same way, Theodore Herzl was always walking on the streets of Vienna and feeling alienated from the very society he was born to. He was on one hand, too Jewish for the Europeans, and at the same time, too European for the Orthodox Jews. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Herzl himself didn't speak any Hebrew, and I don't speak any Baba Malay, which is a patois language of Malay and Hokkien. So I speak English and Malay, but the point is, I too know what it's like to be constantly othered and treated as a suspicious foreigner by all sides. But here's where I diverge from Theodore Herzl. Because while Herzl's anger and his rage calcified, and it basically led him to build a fortress, my goal is to basically turn Malaysia into a garden where nobody is denied dignity because of their race or the languages they speak or don't speak, right? Unfortunately, the Zionist analyzes the contradictions of society correctly, but his solution rather is basically to build a fortress and to become militant like a terrorist, right? So let's get back to where we were. Okay, so first of all, I don't hate Zionists, but I think that a lot of people on the left, in fact, are now talking like Zionists, even if they don't realize it. Because when you dehumanize people, even if you don't like Israelis, when you dehumanize them and you treat them all as if they are bad, and you tar all of them as bad under the same brush, even though many people in that country are basically workers, exploited proletariat like you and me. I'm not strictly proletariat, but many people in Israel are workers who are also being crushed under the boot heel of capital. Yeah, I mean, it's regrettable that they were born to that country, but at the same time, they did not choose the country they were born to. So when I say that we start organizing with the class-conscious proletariat of Israel, that is not a betrayal of the left. That is revolutionary discipline in action. It's just like when you start organizing with the class-conscious proletariat of Japan in the Second World War, in order to instill the sense of revolutionary defeatism in their hearts. That's not revisionism. That is revolutionary clarity, if I'm being frank. And when Israel, under the false consciousness of Zionism, chose the path of reaction rather than revolution, when they decided to side with the very same powers that were oppressing them, instead of building a class-conscious Jewish proletariat and a class-conscious European and Arab proletariat, they already produced their own grave diggers. Because Israel is basically a settler colonial state that is basically a satellite that is used by the very same people who were oppressing the Jews for centuries. They never stopped oppressing them. They simply got sneakier in their oppression. Do you know why it exists? It exists because you can't stand being around Jewish people. That's why you created Israel. You created that fake settler ethno-state in order to get the Jews as far away from you as possible and use them as proxies in your war against the Arabs, in your endless pursuit of capital in the Middle East. Yes, you never stopped persecuting the Jews. You simply got smarter about it. Yes. In fact, Churchill actually supported Zionism. If you read the essay Bolshevism or Zionism, well, you read Churchill's essay, you'll find that Churchill actually supported Zionism because it was a solution to what he termed Bolshevism, which he described as a Jewish conspiracy. Oh, look, the port of Penang, isn't it beautiful? Ooh, I'll let you take a look at it. Come, let's take a look at it. Right, so Churchill basically described Bolshevism as a Jewish conspiracy and Zionism as the solution to that Jewish conspiracy, because when you instill ethno-nationalistic consciousness in the Jews and you obfuscate the real contradictions of society, which is Jewish capital exploiting Jewish labor, well, then what happens is that you basically nullify the threat of Jewish Bolshevism. These are not my words. These are Churchill's words. Yeah, he described Bolshevism as a Jewish problem. Yeah, so basically, the reactionaries in the West never stopped persecuting the Jews. Some of the most anti-Semitic people, like Churchill and Lord Balfour, did not even like Jews. In fact, if I were to advocate an ethno-state in Malacca or Penang, a Peranakan ethno-state, guess what? Some of the most reactionary Chinese ultras in Kuala Lumpur would be happy to support that ethno-state because it would get the anglicized Peranakans as far away from them as possible. And not only that, they could basically use us as a proxy against the other racial groups in Malaysia. So that's basically the same thing with Zionism. Okay, so they never stopped persecuting you. They simply got smarter about it. This is the Georgetown Protestant Cemetery, and this is where the early British colonial residents of Penang are buried. Some of the graves here date back to the 1700s, and most of them date back to the Victorian era. And the latest or the earliest grave, or I should say the last known grave, is in the 1900s, the early 1900s. So this is one of the oldest and most interesting landmarks of Penang. And I'm going to take you to meet its most famous resident, Francis Light, who is basically my British predecessor. It's here somewhere. It's really, really difficult to find. But I'll find it. It's just one of these graves. Yes, one of these graves. You know, just I don't want to be stepping on anyone's toes, metaphorically, so I need to be careful that I don't step on anyone's grave by accident. Oh, this one's slanted. Let's see. Edward Barlow, Bengal Civil Service. Okay, youngest son of Sir G.H. Barlow. Okay, this is definitely not him. Rest in peace, Mr. Barlow. Where is he? Yes. No, it's here somewhere. I'll find it. Oh, this poor guy. Not even 30 and already passed away. Oh well, that's the thing about modern medicine is that a lot of things that would have been a death sentence in the past are now treatable. And that's the beauty of progress. So socialism is progress, you see. I have found it. Francis Light, sorry for the reverse camera. The grave of the most famous person in Penang, Francis Light. Yes, the man to whom I owe the pleasure of speaking English right now. The first governor of Penang, Francis Light. Yes. There were some boat people in America, some descendants of colonial compradors, mind you, who accused me of being mentally colonized because I am an English-speaking Straits Chinese Peranakan, and I identify as Peranakan rather than Chinese. But let me make myself absolutely clear. If speaking English and enjoying the finest fruits of British civilization, such as Shakespeare, Dickens, and the Bible, make me mentally colonized, I am the happiest colonial subject and happily mentally colonized. Yes. And if the ghost of Francis Light is standing right next to me, which I assume he is smiling at me. God, I love the British. I love the fact that they brought liberal democracy to us, which gives us the power of choice. The power to choose between who gets to oppress us. Yes, but in any case, in all seriousness, yes, Francis Light is significant because he is the reason I'm speaking English today. And because of him, I can basically spread the message of socialism to most parts of the world. All thanks to Francis Light. And that is why I say, thank you, Francis Light, for giving me the power of the English language. And I am most happily mentally colonized, if being mentally colonized means speaking English properly and not like some gangster in Taukeh. Why, yes, I am the most happily mentally colonized chap in the world. Yes. Actually, Francis Light's son, William Light, ended up becoming the governor of Adelaide. So by coincidence, I also studied in Adelaide. So Penang and Adelaide are very much like sister cities. So I really like Penang because it has a culture and it has a vibrant history. It's not like Kuala Lumpur. In fact, if you skip Kuala Lumpur and come straight to Penang or straight to Malacca, I don't blame you, because Kuala Lumpur is a very soulless, cultureless, capitalist dystopia that was founded by gangsters, but that's another story for another day. But seriously, if speaking English gloriously and spreading the dawah of socialism to all corners of the globe with the English language makes me mentally colonized, why, I am the happiest colonial subject in the world, and it's all thanks to Francis Light that I am this way. And that is why I say it is a mistake to tar all Zionists, not talking about Jews here, but to tar all Zionists under the same brush as irredeemably evil people, because many of them really are very frightened people, and they have been instilled with a lot of false consciousness into believing that Israel is the only way they have security and safety, and ironically, Israel is the most dangerous place to be a Jew right now. But yes, the bus driver, the nurse, and the laborer in Israel is not our enemy, even if they may suffer from false consciousness. Because revolutionary consciousness does not develop naturally. Many workers, including workers in Kuala Lumpur, also have false consciousness. It's our job, in order to direct them towards revolutionary consciousness, so they can see the shape of the world correctly, that they might tear it down. It's not us who will tear the world down, it's the workers who will tear the world down and build a new one. But to do that, you have to stop demonizing every single Zionist worker and actually meet them where they are. Okay, and understand the source of their fear. You know, just like, you know, they do have a legitimate fear that's based on real history. But let me end this video by saying that just like I don't want to replace the colonial master's whip with the Chinese Taukeh's pen, I don't want the Israelis to be defeated only to be crushed and then replaced by a Palestinian oligarchy. That's not what I aim for. The end of Israel must signal the end of oppression, all forms of class oppression, and not simply national oppression. So I hope that the left does not support a burgeoning Palestinian oligarchy, but rather the left focuses on a class-conscious proletariat Palestinian movement in the region. That's what is ideal. So to the workers of Israel, if you're watching this video, I want you to know that you are not my enemy, and I do not consider you to be my enemy. The real enemy of the working class is not the worker of Palestine or Israel, but the imperialist vultures who play the workers of the world against each other and send the workers of the world to kill each other. Yes, I'm not excusing Hamas either. I think they're a bunch of bastards as well, okay? That's gonna get me slagged by the left, but I don't really care. I think both sides are bastards. It just so happens to be that Hamas has a slightly more legitimate stake in this. But yeah, basically, the oligarchs and the imperialists and the capitalist vultures are the real enemies of the working class, not the workers of the world who are just trying to make a living and are just trying to take care of their families. And I fear that when you start demonizing the workers of Israel and you start treating them as if they are the enemy, you know, even the Israeli grandmother who's never picked up a rifle in her life, why I fear that you might be replicating the same patterns of the Zionists, because then you're basically saying that this group suffered immensely, they suffered persecution immensely, so we must be cruel back. But I say no, we do not dehumanize the Israelis, even if, for the sake of argument, many Israelis are monsters, okay? They became monsters because their anger and their fear calcified into hate. But we do not dehumanize them, because then we start repeating the vicious cycle. After Israel gets defeated, we become the new Zionists. Okay, so I hope that when Israel falls, and it will die a natural death, that the left maintains a principled stance and matriculates the Israeli workers into the new society, basically. I hope that we don't repeat the same cycle of vengeance towards the people of Israel, because, not because they deserve it, not because they deserve our grace, but because I don't want us turning into the very thing we fought against. I think I'm going to end this video soon, but Friedrich Nietzsche's words are very, very pertinent to this video. When you fight monsters, take care that you do not become a monster yourself. For when you stare into the abyss stares back at you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.